It's a busy summer morning in a really super soaked environment with the humidity level so high, and that's triggering off some heavy thunderstorms already. We're going to be checking out the radar. We have the latest from the Storm Prediction Center. Breaking news. And of course, we will look to see what the impact of all of this is going to be, because we do have flood watches up from northern New England all the way down to eastern North Carolina. So all of that is coming up right now on the Sunday morning Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. Get your truck over to Omni and load it up with all the topsoil, sand, and especially mulch, whatever you need. They got it to make your home or the outside of your business look terrific. 631-756-1125 is the telephone number. Nowhere can you find better prices, and the website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
And this is a good day to have a weather station handy, or have one at your home. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system, Tempest by Weatherflow, enjoying the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The referral link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video, and be sure to use the coupon code Joe and Joe Weather Show, because if you do, what do they get, Joe?
They get 10% off, Joe.
They do. So here we are on Sunday morning. Last time we were on was Thursday, advertising the probability that we were going to see some downpours and heavy rains at some point during the day, Sunday into Sunday night. Seems to be all coming together on the radar, on the radars. And SPC, we'll do this right now since we're talking about it. So let me bring it up on the screen. SPC just issued, Joe, a mesoscale discussion for a possible severe thunderstorm watch from central and eastern Maryland across the western counties of New Jersey into the Hudson Valley west of the Hudson, and covering much of south central, southeastern, and northeastern Pennsylvania. How do you feel about this, Mr. Rayo?
They have been, not just SPC, but also the folks at WPC have been playing catch-up since Thursday with this. Remember, on Thursday, we were speculating about potential heavy rainfall, and they had basically the Hudson Valley, places north and west of New York City, in a marginal risk for flooding, for flash flooding. And then they upgraded that on Friday to a slight risk, surrounded by a marginal risk. And now, as of this morning, and I see you just put it up on the screen, everybody in the New York metropolitan area and points west and north are now under a moderate risk of excessive rainfall today, into actually from later today into tonight and into at least part of tomorrow. I can tell you that even though the real rain has not yet arrived, it's not expected here until after 2 or 3 o'clock. We've already had a few isolated cells pop up. One of them passed over my house and dumped a quickie, and I don't have the exact number, and maybe if Mrs. Rayo is hearing this right now, she can go over to the rain gauge and see how much we picked up. But we had a nice little downpour, and she was, right after that, she looked on the radar and she said, "Look at that. There's hardly anything anywhere, but right over our house, there's this heavy, drenching downpour." And that's really the story. The atmosphere is so very, very humid that we're going to have to be dealing with the potential of 2, 3, and yes, dare I say, if convection especially gets involved, maybe some places getting in excess of 4 inches of rain out of this. Not out of the question, Joe, over the next 24 hours.
No, and I just want to point out for the folks that are, this is, of course, a summer weekend. A lot of people are at the shore. There's not a whole lot going on if you're in the coastal counties of New Jersey, if you're in Delaware, maybe you're sitting on Rehoboth Beach, if you're further south on the Maryland Eastern Shore, Long Island, southern and southeastern New England. There are, if you look on I've got the wide radar view, and Joe's going to take us around on the tighter views momentarily, but there are some odd downpours here and there, but much of this area is dry. And I think much of the area along the immediate coast will be dry through the early to middle part of the afternoon, and then weather conditions will deteriorate after that. So if you're at the shore right now, watching us, if you've got a signal, uh, especially if you're on Long Island, there's not a whole lot happening. So you're not in any kind of rush that you need to leave. So just enjoy. Sometimes, Joe, when you hear the forecast, they're sort of broadly written to cover a large geography, and there's a distinct difference sometimes in especially in the summertime, where if you go into eastern Pennsylvania, the radar's a lot busier. We already got warnings up, flash flood warnings, and a couple of severe thunderstorm warnings, and it could be pouring there, but not doing much yet at some of the immediate coastal areas. So I just wanted to kind of put that on the table for everybody.
Yeah, and locally here yesterday, when I was out yesterday, I actually went to, well, not your old stomping grounds. This was actually around Melville and South Huntington. But still, from where I was yesterday when I started my trek, a few minutes before 2 o'clock, to the time I finally arrived, just after 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I ran through a couple of really brief, heavy downpours. And yet, where I am here in Putnam Valley, when I came back late last night, checked the rain gauge, 0, got nothing. So it all depends upon where you are. Some of you, most of you, up until now, probably have seen very little. Those of you who were had the misfortune of having one of these downpours, if you will, pass overhead, you probably picked up a quickie 1 or 2/10 of an inch of rain in only about 10 or 15 minutes. And now we're getting ready to see a much larger area converge upon the entire tri-state region, which is going to bring us, again, quite a bit of rainfall here this afternoon, tonight, and into the early part of tomorrow.
So let's look at, first off, we've got SPC. They've issued this possible severe thunderstorm watch going up. 40% probability is how they have listed it, inside the blue areas in eastern PA and into western New Jersey, down into Maryland, and a little, even including the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area. Philadelphia is in it. New York City is just outside of it. And they mention here that, first off, the atmosphere with minimal heating is showing Cape values up at around 1,500, which is pretty impressive. And then they go on about in their discussions. It's a series of on the other hands. On the other hand, the capping is weak, so I guess that means that maybe the tops aren't going to be able to get as high as you normally would see in stronger severe thunderstorm threats. And then there's another on the other hand, which is the moist environment shown by what we call the PWATS, or the precipitable water, but basically measuring how much potential rainfall there is. And that stands, Joe, up above the 90th percentile. So I think we could safely say that while there probably will be the odd severe thunderstorms in here, this is really going to be a much more of a soaking rain type event, because it's going to, once it gets in, it's going to last for a while. And we talked about how the drought map was still showing things very dry in spite of some big rainfalls, and we were speculating that, well, maybe that had to do with the fact that when it did rain, the times it has rained over the last few weeks, very convective and has gone very fast, so that the rain would run off. I could probably safely say with this situation that soaking and far less runoff.
I just want to tell you, Joe, that for whatever reason, the audio has been breaking up.
Oh, I'm sorry, because I had to go in the kitchen and take a pizza out of the oven.
Oh, well.
I'm sorry. It should have worked in there. It has before. Okay,
well, so you're back to sounding good.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry. I guess maybe, I don't know. I don't know why it's the case. Maybe my battery's not where it should be. But no matter. I'm sitting still now.
And yeah, so
how much of that did you miss?
I'd say about 30% of it was choppy. I mean, I'm sure many people were able to understand what you were saying. It's just that it was it was just cutting out periodically from time to time. So, but don't worry, the message got through.
Okay, good. All right, so let me just say, Birder Lady and Ken Musillo are her early hits to the tip jar. Thank you for hitting Super Chat. And Mr. Radio is going to be loading up the local radar so we can take a look at what's going on. I've got the wide loop here before you pull up the locals.
Well, you got to give me sharing capabilities too.
Of course. Well,
yeah,
that goes without saying.
Right.
But I'm glad you said it because I forgot to give it to you. But yeah, it's all set to go. So you just let me know when you're ready. I just want to, point out that we do have a couple of, one flash flood warning up for a county in north central PA, west of I-81. There's three severe thunderstorm warnings now that have popped up also in eastern Pennsylvania. And there's quite a bit of rain back in western PA, particularly down into West Virginia and western Virginia, western North Carolina. So the radars are starting to load up. They should get more. They should fill out much more as we move through the afternoon and into the evening hours.
Okay, well, I have the Upton radar up, if you want to put it up on the screen.
And I will do that.
If you were with us just a few minutes ago, I mentioned that while most of the region was high and dry, that we here in Putnam Valley picked up a quickie little downpour, and my wife was, somewhat upset about that. Where did this come from? Well, dear, if you're looking at the radar right now, you can see that literally right before your eyes, almost popping like measles, across the tri-state region, are localized showers and heavy downpours, again, because the atmosphere is so very, very moisture laden. Now, the main area that the flood watches and advisories have been posted, that area just is edging into the northwestern edge of the screen here, but that's out there. Again, what's popping up now is simply due to instability, and again, any one of these, although it doesn't look very organized, it doesn't look like anything very impressive. If you're anywhere underneath any one of these singular cells, you're going to get hit with a pretty heavy downpour for a relatively short interval of time. Look at this area that is crawling now up along the immediate Jersey shore, moving from southwest to northeast. If this holds together, I would presume that in a couple of hours, the folks who are living in Nassau and western end of Suffolk County are going to be encountering this. So you're right, Joe. Everything is loading up, if you will. Let me take a look here at a view off to the, let's take a look off to the south first at the Ellendale Dover Air Force Base radar. And you can see again, there's that area moving across the Jersey shore. And look at all of this stuff that is popping up now over southeastern Pennsylvania, Amish country, if you will. And again, the areas of yellow and orange and red, those are the areas where you're going to be seeing moderate to heavy rainfall. And further back to the west, this is the region that Joe pointed out that the folks over at SPC are mulling over. 40% probability, perhaps, of putting up a severe thunderstorm watch for later on in the day, more like midday or early afternoon. And already we can see places around Harrisburg, for example, and over toward Williamsport, areas of orange and red, indicating, again, locally heavy spells of precipitation. I'm not sure whether or not this is convective. It seems like it is. And there may be some thunderstorms, lightning and thunder appearing. So that area or potential thunderstorm watch area may indeed develop and may appear on our maps very soon, very shortly. Let's go further back west over toward, let's look at the Pittsburgh area. And here, this is the area right here that's going to be over our area, our part of the country, the Connecticut, New York, New Jersey area, probably later today and into tonight. And again, these areas of yellow and orange and red are areas of moderate to heavy rainfall. And it seems to be progressing at a good clip to the east. So it looks like this area could be over us in about 5 or 6 hours if it keeps moving this way. Which means like if you have anything out of doors planned for 4 or 5 o'clock, good luck. I hope you have a tent or an umbrella because you're going to probably need it to stay dry. Looking at any other area here.
Hold on a second. Why don't we take a look? So you just did Dover, right?
I did Dover. I did Pittsburgh. This is now Washington, D.C., Sterling, Virginia.
Okay.
You see moving into western Maryland, eastern sections of West Virginia, and west central Pennsylvania. That's the area that we'll be watching for later today, the area that could lead to flooding concerns, especially in areas of poor drainage for, again, parts of the tri-state area, the Hudson Valley. So that's a coming, and it will be here before too much longer.
One of the tricky parts in a situation like this was first of all, you got this really super juicy atmosphere. I mean, the dew points are sitting somewhere between 70 and 75 just about everywhere. So you're basically walking in soup. Eventually, it's going to fall as you're going to have rain coming down. But the tricky part, I think, in terms of trying to figure out the forecast amounts, I mean, you could sort of broad brush, Joe, a general area of rainfall of 2 to 4 inches, but in these types of situations where you get these convective areas that form inside these larger areas of rain, and you get under that and you get clobbered with rain, this is where you could wind up certainly where some spots are going to get maybe finish above the top of that range. The other thing I think I want to just point out is that the further east you are, if you look at the GFS and some of the other models, they're kind of putting the axis of the heaviest rains of the 2.5 to 3.5 inches. I mean, this is what's being modeled, and I think given the way the atmosphere is, we may wind up here with upside. The axis of the heaviest rains look like they're in northeastern Pennsylvania, northwest New Jersey, which, by the way, lately has been the jackpot zone with on a number of these days when we've had showers and thunderstorms. There's less on the coast, 3/4 of an inch to 1.25 inches, but there are also some pockets of 1.5 inches over Long Island. Maybe that comes during tonight. But western and northwestern New England, up in Vermont, western New Hampshire, western Massachusetts, northwest Connecticut, and the areas in the Hudson Valley, perhaps east of the Hudson River, look like they're in a zone of 3 inches plus. So certainly the flood watches are justified, and now it's going to be a matter of how the radars react during the day, and where eventually some warnings are going to be issued.
Yes, and again, combine that with the potential severe thunderstorm watch that'll be, and they have it posted west. You mentioned mostly west of New York City, but that doesn't mean that they could post additional thunderstorm watches further east as things develop or evolve later today or into tonight. So it's going to be, no question, a very active period over these next 24 hours, again, due to severe flood watches and because of the threat of flooding and because of the severity of the possible thunderstorm activity that we may see.
This is where, Joe, you would play the da 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 da. We have this breaking bulletin. We actually do now have a severe thunderstorm watch that has been posted for the western counties of New Jersey from south to north, and also for much of south central, southeastern Pennsylvania, northeastern Pennsylvania, and northeastern Maryland. So they did this the SPC just put this out. So we went from, they put out the mesoscale discussion, and they talked about how on the discussion they also did mention how busy the radars were already getting. So I guess somebody decided to push the button. And the main threat from the severe thunderstorms, by the way, is going to be wind. The SPC's got. This is where I'm just kind of wondering, given the sort of setup and how high the dew points are, and this low and cold front that are moving eastward. I just wonder whether you might get a cell or two that produces a little bit of a spin up. that may be one of these spin ups that comes and goes very quickly. So I wouldn't rule out the possibility that you know maybe a tornado spins up somewhere.
Now, Desp House daughter on the chat board says, it's sunny here in Ridge. I wonder if, despite the models indicating less rain for Long Island, if the instability will be stronger due to the sun being out all morning. Well, of course, if you're going to have sun stirring the atmosphere and making it all, but literally percolating the atmosphere into convective action. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, we have a watch right now, as Joe has it on the screen, for places mostly west of the immediate New York City area. But that's not to say that later on in the day today or this evening, that watch may be extended further to the east. In fact, I have a pretty good idea that it will be extended further to the east, and that we will be seeing a threat of convective activity. So, Death's House daughter, yeah, that sun isn't going to help you any. The longer it's out, the warmer it's going to get, the more unstable and more humid and sticky it's going to be. Probably will make for the conditions to lead itself to potential activity for thunderstorms.
By the way, if I neglected to say, I don't know if I said Delaware before. The northern counties of Delaware, northern county of Delaware, Newcastle County is in the watch. In Maryland, it also includes Baltimore. The Baltimore, Philadelphia is in this watch. New York City is not in this particular watch. And SPC actually did. We're kind of jumping around with maps today, but SPC did expand their area of slight risk all the way up almost to Binghamton on the northern side. Not quite to, kind of cutting New Jersey in half from north to south. So from there, west and south, all the way into northeastern South Carolina, where you have a slight risk for severe weather, and the marginal risk is pushed. Now, see, this is where I might have disagreed. They got the marginal risk. I know they got general thunderstorms all the way east of New England. I might have just kind of pushed the marginal risk a little further east if it were me. I might have drawn it down into eastern Connecticut and eastern Long Island. But you know what? I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt since they have a lot of the tools that you and I don't have. We should also mention, by the way, slight risk of severe weather over a large portion of the Gulf states. And there is a hefty looking line that's already moving out of East Texas and into southwestern Arkansas and about to move into northeastern Louisiana. So there also the main risk is going to be from wind, and maybe in the southern storms perhaps there could be a little bit of hail. But I'm still kind of leaning on the idea is that really rain is the bigger deal here for the Northeast and the northern Mid-Atlantic states.
Renata mentions on the chat board that already here at the home base in Putnam Valley, we already have had 0.44 inches. Now, this is, again, that 0.44 has come from these little renegade cells that have just popped up in the last couple of hours out ahead of the main area that's still well off to the west of us. So if we're just we've got nearly a half an inch of rain with just these little localized cells, one can only imagine what we're going to receive when the steadier, heavier rains arrive later on this afternoon and on into tonight. And then, again, tossing a thunderstorm here and there. And we may be looking at quite a bit of rain. Again, you said 2 to 4, Joe, a general area. And I wouldn't be surprised, especially in that seeming epicenter of precipitation these past 2 or 3 weeks, that area across north central and central New Jersey. Somebody down there might pick up, 4, 5, 6 inches. I mean, it's getting ridiculous.
Tomorrow, by the way, SPC has a marginal risk of severe weather from northern New Jersey and to Long Island, Connecticut, Rhode Island, much of Massachusetts, southern Vermont, and New Hampshire, and the Hudson Valley. But that's tomorrow. Just wanted to put that up there. So meanwhile, here's what the surface map looks like this morning, or at least it did at 8 a.m. this morning. I'm looking here. These dew points are just already in the low 70s. I mean, we've got low 70 dew points all the way up into just about into southern Vermont and New Hampshire, and even up you go up into Maine. I mean, the dew points were in the mid to upper 60s. That cannot be pleasant. And you know you've got a fairly the dew points are actually lower as you go south. Some 60 dew points. And some of this has to do with the fact that we're getting a rain-cooled atmosphere. You see temperatures, for example, where it's raining in West Virginia, it's in the mid 60s, as opposed to the temperatures that early this morning were already in the mid to upper 70s. I don't know what your temperatures are up there now. I haven't looked, but
Yeah, about 70. I'm at 78, 79 or thereabouts.
yeah. This looks like. I mean, this does smell like a heavy rain event. Got even a southeast wind that brings in the Atlantic moisture. Meanwhile, across the south where I am, because we do have folks that are watching here in Georgia and in the Carolinas. Actually, the beginning of the day, not too bad. We'll go to the satellite loop with the lightning strikes to see what's going on, and I just giving the loop a quick refresh here, and yeah, I just want to make sure it's on the screen. You're beginning to see a few lightning strikes showing up in parts of Pennsylvania, down into western PA, and also in that complex that's further east in the state. There's a couple of lightning strikes in western North Carolina, but southeast Virginia down to coastal Georgia is nice and sunny at the moment, and you see the lightning strikes from the storms with the line that's moving out of Texas and into Arkansas. But that actually looks like it's weakening a little bit. So perhaps it's past its prime, and then they'll start to fire up again later on. Leon Probitsky hitting the tip jar. Thank you, Leon. Most appreciated. Also, Helen Bertona. Appreciate the tip jar hit as well. And we always like to keep you informed, and thank you for hitting Super Chat. So I think that's the last two because I got the first two earlier. So there's
Yeah.
yeah, beautiful day, by the way, in the plains and on in the west, where it's hardly a cloud in the sky and nice and sunny, at least to start off the day. Here's the close-up loop, and I'll give it a quick refresh here. Let it load, and we'll take a look at these developing storms. By the way, I don't know if you picked up on this. If you look out south of Nova Scotia, Joe, I mean it's a weak low, but was a interesting looking low level swirl that was out there yesterday, and you can actually still see that swirl. Although there's nothing tropical about this,
Yeah.
but you see the flashes there are beginning to pick up. And again, on the wide radar view, you'll show you that line that's down. Oh, on the map's jumping around all over the place. You can see the line that's moving into Arkansas and eventually into northwest Louisiana. Kind of, the cells are starting to weaken a bit. We've got some scattered cells across the Florida Panhandle and southeast Louisiana. Southern end of the rain and some thunderstorms in western North Carolina. Some scattered storms in parts of Ohio and Kentucky. And in the west, a few scattered showers and a couple of thunderstorms in Washington State. But otherwise, the west is fairly quiet. WPC's forecast rainfall hasn't really changed too much. As we showed you, it's a moderate risk of flash flooding that they're indicating from the map that we showed you earlier. I'll pop it up again. You can see the moderate risk from Vermont and western. It's a 45. Moderate means at least 40 to as much as 69%. Because if it were at least 70%, it would be a high risk. So for now, they've got a moderate risk for Vermont, Western Mass, Western Connecticut, New York City, Western Long Island, most of New Jersey except the southeast, the eastern half of Pennsylvania, roughly down into Maryland and northern Delaware. And then you've got slight risk that goes further down into North Carolina. And also we have a slight risk for flash flooding indicated in the Gulf states, north and west into southeastern Oklahoma, northeastern Texas. And then for tomorrow might be an interesting day in that there may still be some local downpours to, and the risk that there could be some showers and thunderstorms. I mean, I don't think it's going to be any kind of widespread shower and thunderstorm activity in eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England. But as you go further north into New England, it might be a little more widespread there. And I think that's why for the daytime tomorrow, WPC also has a moderate risk for flash flooding in Vermont, New Hampshire, and western Mass, and a slight risk going up into Maine and it's still holding on to a marginal risk from about Route 195 in New Jersey and northeastern Pennsylvania, north and east. So tomorrow might be one of those days that after the saturated ground that results from what falls overnight, that if you get an odd thunderstorm or two tomorrow, you could wind up with some local areas that might show some flash flooding relatively quickly.
Yeah, and but the worst of it, I think we should again stress, the worst of this is going to be from mid to late afternoon today through at least overnight tonight, and petering out or tapering down somewhat by the early part of the day tomorrow. That's when whatever we see in terms of, let's say, 2 or 3 or even 4 inches, a goodly amount of that will be during that 12-hour time frame from about again mid to late afternoon through the first half of tonight and on into the early hours of tomorrow morning.
And the rainfall forecast is from WPC. The, the purple is 1.5 inches. The red is 2.5. So you see in Northeast PA, Northwest Jersey, and particularly when you go up the middle and upper Hudson Valley and points north in that orange, that's 5 inches or more. So this is a 7-day forecast that goes through next Sunday. Most of this is, but not all, is front end loaded, but a vast majority of it is. Also, note some heavier rains of 1.5 inches to several inches possible in the middle Mississippi Valley and in the Missouri Valley River Valley Basin. In back into the Central Plains, kind of tails off a bit the further west you go. Also, some pockets of heavy rain along the Gulf Coast of up to several inches over the next week, and the west is nice and dry. So, let's do a little bit of long range here, and we'll take a look at this. So here's my revelation, Joe. I was just looking at the upper air on the GFS, and it's if we roll it through the next 2 weeks in the east, it's trough after trough after trough, just keeps dropping into the eastern part of the United States, and most of the ridging wants to stay in the west, particularly in the latter part of the forecast period, which takes us, by the way, to July 25th. So we're moving right along here, but if you're kind of trying to envision a pattern change coming out of all of this, if we look at the wider view, I mean, we've been talking about the fact that we've had this, for this time of year, a very off-the-wall NAO, and I'm just putting up here, the upper air across North America out for at least 10 days. And I mean, when you look at the pressure patterns that are going on up around Greenland and all in this region here in the Arctic, pressures are higher than normal there. I mean, that's a signature for a negative North Atlantic oscillation, which the snow lovers know if this were wintertime, they'd be dancing in the streets. That doesn't really go away very much, if at all, during the day. It might sort of ebbs and flows a little bit, but the signature pattern apparently this summer is, which began during the month of June, is one where we're going to have an active Canadian jet that's further south of normal and shows no signs of breaking down anytime soon.
Right, and if you're looking for some cooler and drier Canadian air, it just doesn't seem to want to get in here. I mean, again, with these troughs, we're going to end up with probably more cloud cover than anything else, and the threat of precipitation. But I'm looking, Joe. Maybe, well, you said going out, let's say 372 hours, if you want to go that far out. Maybe by the 24th of July, which is what, 2 weeks from 2 weeks from now, 2 weeks from this Monday or whatever, we may get into a northwest flow, taking air down from Hudson Bay and into our neck of the woods, and that might actually bring some relief to this seemingly endless period of moderate to high level of humidity that we're again going to have to deal with for the next at least the next week or two.
Look at I got the temperature anomaly, Lupin. It's pretty interesting. The way the troughs are accessed in the east, it's not far enough east to get into some of the drier and really cool air. I mean, these are sizable anomalies for July in the plains. Uh, we're talking temperatures that, just going back to Thursday, we're running as much as 15 degrees below average, believe it or not. And that's sort of where that below normal. We're kind of on the edge of it here in the east. Certainly not above normal, but closer to normal. And we start to get these periods, for today with cloud cover and tomorrow probably as well. Temperatures are going to be mostly below average, which is what the model's sort of showing. And as we go through time, you're getting these pulses of cool air, but they're going south into the Dakotas, into the northern plains, and not making a whole lot of eastward progress because maybe the trough axis is just a little bit too far to the west. Now, eventually, after about day 8 or 9, you start to see that below those the darker blue with the below normal temperatures try to push a little bit more to the east, toward the east coast and into the southeast. I'm looking forward to this if this were right, which we know it probably won't be like this. And meanwhile, we should emphasize that, of course, well, if this is correct, this would be going on in the eastern part of the United States. You could see what's going on in the west, especially in western Canada, where temperatures are going to be running well above normal because that's where the ridge is. So the heat in the west that's developing is probably going to ebb and flow a bit and maybe get stronger toward the middle part of the month. Today's what? Today's the 9th?
The 9th.
Yeah, so it seems to want to get stronger, in the second week of the long range, and that would also mean troughing in the eastern part of the United States. This is a very I don't remember the last time we've seen a kind of upper air pattern like this in the month of July.
Yeah, and the only problem with this, if we had drier air, I mean, it would be great. But I mean, the fact that we have, and of course, part of the reason why we have these temperatures averaging below normal is that we have a lot of clouds, and we also are seeing quite a bit of precipitation, and the humidity is on the high side. This is not a Garden of Eden summer where you're seeing, unusually cool, dry, pleasant air. No, this is not the case for at least this year here in the northeastern part of the country.
I've got the GFS surface map up, and you can see the blow up of rain that occurs by 2 p.m., covering much of New York State, western Vermont, and Massachusetts, western New Jersey, eastern and central Pennsylvania, down into Virginia and North Carolina. You see a low there in eastern North Carolina that's on this sort of weird frontal boundary that's in the east. And then that gradually swings eastward this evening and into tonight and takes its time getting out of the way for tomorrow. You see where the model does show heavier downpours and thunderstorms in upstate New York and New England, but I think WPC is probably wise with indicating the marginal risk as far south as they have it. There's some rain and thunderstorms tonight into tomorrow morning for the southeastern states, and that's good for me because this way I don't have to water my plants. And then that moves out, and then much of next week really doesn't look like too much happens other than very warm to borderline hot and humid conditions most of the time. And the next chance of showers and thunderstorms looks like there'll be some scattered storms around Thursday with an approaching frontal boundary and something a bit stronger for Friday night into Saturday. In a way, it kind of looks like what we're going through now. So maybe it's a repeat performance. And then after that goes by, with the strong Canadian northwest flow, there's a couple of more fronts along the way and a couple of chances for showers and thunderstorms along the way. This should alleviate, I would think, the whatever dry conditions that are being indicated by the hydrology folks.
I would hope so, because it was surprising. The last two reports for our area still had much of the region, in spite of all of those heavy rains in recent weeks, still had us in exceptionally dry conditions. But of course, we tried to explain that by maybe runoff. A lot of the rain just simply ran off and not soaked into the ground. But this is definitely what's coming our way later today and tonight. This is definitely a soaker, and that should go a ways to helping to alleviate the drought situation. Somebody also talked about I mentioned about the winds coming out of the northwest. Will this alleviate the smoke activities? I mean, more smoke. I'm not even sure. We were where I was at yesterday. I was at a party on Long Island, and we got
Joe, you
but
there?
from what he heard, the Canadian government more or less has just thrown up their arms and has just given up, um, which I hope is not going to be the case. But he heard that this may continue right on into the start of the winter. Would you
Oh,
believe?
well, I'll say this as I didn't look at the smoke the fire and smoke website this morning, but I did look at it yesterday. It doesn't look like there were the smoke was not nearly as bad as it was up in Canada. Maybe I had to go far enough north to see it, but not much of it is making it down into the United States right now because of the way the upper air pattern is. So we seem to be. I guess the trade-off is that if we're in a pattern that's going to produce uh, chances for showers and storms with weather fronts coming through every 3 days or so, or every 3 or 4 days, that um, effectively minimizes the risk for the smoke issue, at least for now.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. I'm at this point. You got to play it, I think, on a day-to-day basis and just see what's going to happen. Discussion on the chat board about the higher risk maybe for an East Coast hurricane this year due to the trough in the east. We discussed that a few days ago. If this pattern is to continue, let's say into later August and September, yeah, that would make for an interesting situation. But again, no promises that it is going to continue into late August or September. Maybe there'll be a pattern change about that time.
Or the other option is that you could have the pattern the way it is now, but because of other upper air conditions across the tropics, be it the El Nino, perhaps you don't get the tropical cyclone development that you might normally see. However, you and I both pointed out that weird things have been happening lately, where the atmosphere seems to be behaving in a way that doesn't necessarily run with the usual rules that we like to pay attention to. So I would, I'll just reinforce what I said a couple of times over the last couple of weeks. If we've got this trough in the east in August and September, if this pattern holds, then you have to consider the possibility that there might be some East Coast tropical system threats. But you got to get the systems to form. Got the systems formed first, and then we can concern ourselves with regards to that. Joe Miano hitting super chat. Thank you, Joe. And so did Anthony Spiraccio hitting super chat. Thank you both. Joe says he's having an iced coffee, which is not a bad thing to have.
Yeah.
So you've got the tropical loop up.
I put up the tropical loop, but I just want to. I'm doing this because I want to point out. We talked about this on Thursday. Look at that broad area of Sahara Desert dust. That area, Joe, looks like it has made it all the way from West Africa and is now actually encroached upon the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, and some of the islands here. I mean, that is a. We mentioned this on Thursday. Is this an exceptionally large area of Sahara Desert dust and sand, and that has apparently been the case. It's made its way all the way across the ocean now, and again, well, even to northern portions of the coast of South America.
Yeah,
believe it or not.
Well, this is the time of year where we often see that happen, so I guess we shouldn't be, too surprised. I'll be interested to see if that the early burst of activity with the strong tropical waves that coming across the tropical Atlantic, unlike last year when that zone had shifted all the way down close to the equator during the month of August, it looks like we're seeing them coming out at around 10 degrees north. So the intertropical convergence zone, or ITCZ, which is what they used to call it, seems to be a bit further north than than normal, which is more conducive to tropical cyclone development if that holds into the month of August. We'll have to wait and see on that. By the way, there is a little swirl in the central Atlantic, and the Hurricane Center does mention that in their discussion today. Possibility of something develop in the middle of the Atlantic over the next 7 days is only at about 10 to 20%. But that would be a system that, even if it were to form, would not be something that we would worry about with regards to impacting any land. So anyway, there you go. Not having that switching problem anymore, which is good. So
Good.
let me just check one last time before we say goodbye. And we're going to hold Briller Jeopardy off until tomorrow because I got a few things to do.
Pizza.
Yeah, I got the pizza out of the oven. Now I want to eat it. There's nothing new, additional. We've got another mesoscale severe thunderstorm watch possible. Let's see what this area is for. Okay, so this is for south central Virginia and central North Carolina. So this would include places like Charlotte, Raleigh, Durham, up north on the Virginia side, Danville, and South Hill, Virginia, and on the east side, Rocky Mount, North Carolina, and Fayetteville, North Carolina, on the eastern edge. So this is a 60% probability that a severe thunderstorm watch will be going up there. So thanks everybody for being here on this Sunday morning. The Joe and Joe Weather Show is brought to you by Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Comes in handy when you've got weather like this. And join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The system is easy to install, and you just pretty much have it on your mobile device wherever you go, no matter how many hundreds of miles away you are from it. As long as you got internet service, you can check out the weather at home. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. Use the coupon code Joe and Joe Weather Show, and you get
10% off.
And Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town. And the website is
OmniTrueValue.com. And before we sign off, thank you again to Ken Musillo, Birder Lady, Helen Bertona, Leon Probitsky, Anthony Sparaccio, and Joe Miano for hitting the tip jar super chats this Sunday morning.
And before we get into any kind of trouble, have a good Sunday and stay safe. Bye.
Bye-bye.